Good evening from the University of Findlay and welcome to this 83rd Ohio House District Forum sponsored by the Courier, UFTV 1330 WFIN and 88.3 WLFC. I'm WFIN News Director Doug Jenkins and I'll be serving as your co-moderator for tonight's event. I'll also be joined by editorial writer Steve Dillon of the Courier. I think I got your title right.
You did.
All right, close enough. Now, tonight's forum is an opportunity for you to find out more about the individuals who are running for state representative in the district that covers Hancock, Hardin, and the northern part of Logan County. Now, Steve and I have selected the questions for this evening's forum, and no candidate is aware of what they'll be asked or the order the questions will come. The format for the forum is fairly simple. It consists of 2-minute opening statements by each candidate, as well as a 2-minute closing statement at the end of our festivities. In between these statements, we'll ask a question of the candidates, and they'll have 2 minutes to respond to each question. If we believe a follow-up is necessary, the candidate will be asked that follow-up question, and they'll have 60 seconds to answer. Our participants this evening are Mary Harshfield, representing the Democratic Party, and Robert Sprague, the incumbent, representing the Republican Party. Now, before tonight's forum, we flipped a coin to determine who would give the opening statement. Robert won, and he opted that he would go last in both the opening and closing statements. So, without further ado, we'll get started with our festivities. Opening statements start with Mary Harshfield.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm really happy to be here tonight, and I want to thank the Courier, the WFIN radio, and also the University of Findlay for making it possible. I'm especially glad to have this opportunity because I think that one of the things we need to do most is all talk to each other, and I don't often get a lot of chances to express my democratic thoughts to a lot of people in Findlay. I've noticed there are quite a few Republicans in the area, and I find that most of my friends, even a lot of people that agree with me a lot of the time, don't ever want to talk about politics, and I really think we need to talk about politics. I actually think that we agree on probably 75 or 80 or 90% of everything, and if we talked more, we'd figure that out and we would come to more solutions than we have. So again, thanks for this great opportunity.
All right, Mr. Sprague.
Thank you. My name is Robert Sprague. I'm the current state representative for Hancock County, Hardin County, and the northern portion of Logan County. I want to thank the Courier and thank WFIN and the University of Findlay students and the television station here for hosting this forum. We've done a number of things while I've been in office, and I've been focused on 3 major issues. The first is trying to make sure that our budget is balanced. When I entered office, we had an $8 billion budget deficit. I'm happy to report that we've made it through that over the last 4 years. Our budget is balanced, and that fiscal stability has meant a lot to the economic development of our state because businesses want to go into an environment that they know is stable. The second piece, in terms of what we've been focused on, is making sure that we're competitive with regards to our manufacturers and other businesses in the state so that we create new jobs. We've lowered the state income tax to the lowest level that it's been since 1981. We've also eliminated the estate tax, which was a hindrance. In a lot of cases drove people to places like Florida or Texas. And we've tried to reduce business regulations to make them more fair, more easy to comply with. And we've tried to create stability with regards to things like our Bureau of Workers' Comp rates, which is another key expense for both big and small businesses. The third issue that I've been focused on as state representative is the heroin issue. This affects Hancock County. It dramatically affects Hardin County. As a matter of fact, I got started on the issue when I was called by a constituent down in Hardin County, and she said, "Representative, my 17-year-old daughter has been in and out of rehab 16 different times. We have mortgaged our home trying to get her help, and you need to do something about this." And as a result, we've passed over 14 pieces of legislation and different bills in order to address this problem.
All right, with that said, we'll go ahead and get into our opening questions. Steve, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, we'll start with you, Mary. The legislature is taking steps to reduce the problems of overdose deaths and opioid addiction, yet overdose deaths appear to continue to rise, and the drug addiction problem is still a major one. Are there other approaches to the problem which have been overlooked and need to be tried?
I have to say that the efforts that have been made in the state so far have been good. There have been a number of things, and I have admired Representative Sprague's work on that in the past. I just think that it doesn't go far enough. I think that we need to be able to go take many more steps and spend a lot more money on it. I know that that's an issue that Republicans don't want to hear about, and I've got thoughts on that side of it too. But we need to have longer rehabilitation. We need to have more facilities. I do think that they've gotten started in the right direction, but there just has to be more money behind it.
Mr. Sprague?
Yeah, I appreciate Mary's comments and agree with her that longer treatment is needed for a lot of people that are struggling with drug addiction. One of the ways to extend treatment in terms of drug addiction is to make sure that people have the sober living and peer supports that are necessary to sustain sobriety over the long term. And I continue to push for additional sober housing, sober living arrangements, because we know that that helps get people better. Another thing that helps people recover are drug courts. And drug courts have been proven across the state to be highly effective. As a matter of fact, we have a drug court down in Hardin County that uses Vivitrol, which is a drug that blocks the mu receptor in your brain from being able to use heroin or other opiates. And in conjunction with using this medication-assisted treatment, this Vivitrol program, along with the drug court, the retention rate is 85%, which is absolutely remarkable considering the statewide recovery rate is only about 10%. So I think that there's more that needs to be done, and those come not only in the form of treatment, but also in the form of prevention.
Okay. I'll ask a follow-up on that because we sort of touched on the issue of funding this issue. Because the state has to have a balanced budget, where do you see, how do we best maximize state dollars? And I'll ask the question to both of you. We'll have a minute each on the follow-up. But how can the state best maximize dollars spent on this particular issue?
We have been cutting taxes, which were mentioned here earlier, in this state for a long time, starting back in the 80s. And we've taken away so much tax support that we just have to get it back. We have to restore some of our taxes and reallocate a lot of the money that may be spent in other ways that I would think of as wasteful in order to be able to support these programs. I think that it needs to come from the state, and there needs to be more consideration, and willingness on the part of all parties to actually invest. We will save money in the end. We will save money on, especially, I like the drug courts also, and treating that way, and you have first more success, and you also will save a lot of money right there because you won't be sending so many to prison over the issue.
Mr. Sprague?
Well, I'd like to see us pay for, I think part of it is how you pay for it. And what we currently do is in the Medicaid system, we pay for slices of care. So, if you come in and, we'll pay for a slice of counseling, an hour of counseling, and then we'll pay for a slice of group therapy, or group work. And what needs to happen, in my opinion, is that our payment system needs to evolve, and we need to do a better job of paying for care. And what I would recommend is that we pay for an entire episode of care, and we start paying providers based upon the number of months of sobriety. We pay for results because we know in some cases that the services that we don't pay for, things like peer support, things like being able to get back in and find a job, those things that Medicaid does not pay for currently are actually the things that help people stay sober and sustain their recovery. And so what I would like to see us do is change the way that we pay for drug treatment in the state of Ohio, which I think will have a direct effect on our effectiveness.
Okay. Second question, I believe I get to ask, and we'll stay in the same wheelhouse here and continue to talk about the opiate fight. We've seen so many negative stories in the news, videos of parents passed out in their car because they've overdosed with their kids. How can we get some quick victories in this fight? Is that possible? And can that be orchestrated from the state level? And we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, no, there are no quick, easy victories. If you want to maybe say a quick victory, one of the bills that we passed in the last General Assembly was House Bill 4, which was my bill. It extended the Good Samaritan Act. It extended the naloxone, and then we eventually passed the Good Samaritan bill in another bill later on in the General Assembly. But you know, if you want to talk about quick wins or direct results, the first thing we need to do is stop people from dying. And so that's what the Good Samaritan bill was about. That's what House Bill 4 was about, because we can now have this antidote for heroin that can revive people from an overdose. And we want to make sure that people are incentivized to call 911 and save somebody else's life. That's what the Good Samaritan bill was about. And then also that people have access to a naloxone kit, which reverses the overdoses. But if you really want to solve this problem over the long term, what you have to do is you've got to prevent more people from becoming addicted. And the brutal reality is that in our state over the last 10 years, we've gone from about 70 million doses of prescription narcotics being available through our medical system to 700 million doses coming through our medical system. And that's why this addiction issue has affected communities like ours, because those pills come through the medical system and our young people are becoming addicted to them. So if you want to solve that problem, you've got to address the issue of overprescribing in the state of Ohio.
Ms. Hartsfield, same question to you. Are there areas where we can pick up some quick victories here?
I agree that it's very important to make sure that opioids are not overprescribed. That's a really hard area because so many people do depend on pain pills who actually have cancer or other really serious problems of that sort. We also need to do the education end of it. I really think that maybe a lot of the kids don't realize how drastic it is when they try that first pill. Most of them don't start out that way, but a lot of them do, and they need to understand how drastic it is. I think that more graphic information probably should be on TV. And an effort should be made to get the families who have lost someone to try to contribute the fact that it happens to anybody. It can be some of the best families you know. They have this problem in there, and just knowing that, it would help. So again, I think education is a big focus. I also agree with Mr. Sprague on his points too, but it needs to be financed, and that's maybe one of the harder areas probably for him to get people to listen to him too.
Okay, the next question, Representative Sprague mentioned the Good Samaritan bill, but some have criticized it for being too narrow in scope. Do you believe the legislation will save lives and in turn help lead to recovery?
I think that's good as far as it goes. I'm sure it will help save a few people, but I do think that it's very dangerous in that it has a limit on it. And I noticed that people who are on parole don't get to do that at all. Anybody should be able to do it. It should be wide open that they would have immunity, and yes, that when that's expanded, then it'll be better. So.
Yeah, I think that the Good Samaritan bill is a great step in the right direction. There are some limits on it. The limit is that it's 3 strikes and you're out. We wanted to put some limitations on it because we didn't want necessarily people to have, say, for instance, Lazarus parties all the time, where they use at the very edge. And I mean, this sounds crazy and absurd, but it actually happens where sometimes people use at the edge with the expectation of perhaps even overdosing. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't encourage that sort of behavior and activity. And then also with regards to the Good Samaritan bill, we've done something fairly unique here in that not only have we encouraged people to call 911 and save somebody else during an overdose, and knowing that they would get exemption for minor drug possession charges, but we've also broken down this Chinese wall between the EMS and the information about who is overdosing and the police department, because we know that in Colerain townships down near Cincinnati, what they do is they send out a treatment professional and a police officer and a social worker to people that have overdosed the previous week by using that information. And in a lot of cases, I think they're having a dramatic, making a dramatic difference, because people are actually signing up for treatment when they talk with that police officer and they arrive and they say, look, we're here to help you. We want to get you into treatment. You nearly killed yourself last week, and we're here to make sure that you have a chance for recovery. That's made an enormous difference down in the Cincinnati area, and we've now put the law in place so that that type of model can be used throughout the state of Ohio.
All right, moving along, we'll stay sort of in the same ballpark and talking about substances. Medical marijuana has been passed in Ohio and is now legal in Ohio, but the standards haven't been set yet, so technically not that legal. So what should be the focus of these standards, and what would you lobby for if elected or re-elected? And I believe you're first on this one.
Well, I think that there are some problems with the medical marijuana law that's been passed. I agree that there needs to be some more research on it to see if it is a viable medication, but we have obviously a procedure for that. It's called the FDA. All of our other drugs go through that procedure to make sure that, number one, they're safe for everybody, and number two, that they are, that the efficacy is there, that they actually work. And I think that marijuana should not be held to any kind of a different standard simply because of its popularity. It needs to be held to a scientific standard. With regards to the current medical marijuana law, what I would recommend is that we change three things about it. And this is, first of all, the THC content can go up to 35%, and it can be basically decided by the prescribing physician. Well, the current marijuana on the street typically is about 15% THC, and people get plenty high off of that. Can you imagine the kind of high that's going to happen? I mean, marijuana is a hallucinogenic. If you go up to 35%, that's really strong marijuana. The second piece is, and in a lot of other states, they only pass a limit, say, of 5% THC content or 3% THC content, so people are not using it to get high. The second piece is that it can be prescribed for chronic pain. This is exactly what led to our current narcotic problem with the prescription pills. And then the third piece is that the medical board, in my opinion, needs to have complete control over how the doctors prescribe it. We don't want to get in, again, to another situation like the prescription painkillers, where the medical board is not able to say, these are the specific illnesses that this drug can be prescribed for, and either expand that or narrow it as they find out more about the drug.
All right, Ms. Hirschfield.
Okay, I've been aware for a long time that medical marijuana would be a wonderful way to go, as opposed to many of the prescription drugs that are used now. It has, as far as I've been able to figure out, has never killed anybody using marijuana, not even those who abuse it, and we're not talking about that kind of thing now. It's actually probably less dangerous than alcohol. So I have actually been in favor of being able to have medical marijuana for a while. I don't think that it's that hard, although actually I believe a lot of the big corporations have prevented research that should have been done a long time ago. I think you could get some information by studying how it's been working out in Colorado and Washington State, where they have legal marijuana and have had it for a while now, to be able to study the kinds of results. They're allowed to have recreational marijuana, which is a whole different story, as I pointed out. But there too, they have different grades. They are educated as to what they're able to use and that sort of thing. And I do think that if it's prescribed by a doctor and controlled and kept down, that it needs to not be so worried about. I do think that we need some guidelines, and I think that's a good thing. I understand why the Finley Council's having trouble trying to get settled on the item. It's a difficult topic to figure out the regulations are right at the beginning. But I think it should be solvable, and I think get enough people on it, it'll be good.
The next question is related to medical marijuana. And Mary, you mentioned the city of Findlay. They are considering an indefinite ban on medical marijuana. Considering, though, the majority of Ohioans have said in polls they are in favor of medical marijuana, do you believe the city council's response is appropriate? And if so, should home rule apply in this instance?
Well, it's my understanding that the difficulty for the city is that they don't want it grown here or sold here, maybe. They're not sure yet. I do think that we ought to be doing whatever the rest of the state is doing. And there's some economic opportunity in it. If some others can be growing it, I think probably someone in Findlay should be able to do that too. But no, I don't think that we should be off on our own on that.
Well, I think that the city of Findlay, I mean, they have home rule, and they need to make that decision. And that decision is up to council. It's not up to me or, you know, at the state level. I think they need to make that decision. But let me just say a couple things about marijuana. You know, marijuana is not a safe drug. And I think, you know, if you look at the studies, if you look at a brain scan of somebody that's been using marijuana habitually versus somebody that's not, you can clearly see that their brain activity is depressed. As a matter of fact, people that continually use marijuana, their IQ will be lowered approximately 8 IQ points. So you go from an average IQ of about 100 down to 92, which then puts you in the dull category. So this is not a safe drug to use long term. The second piece is that people become addicted to it. As a matter of fact, in our area, the #1 admittance for addiction is alcohol. If you go down to Southeast Ohio, the #1 admittance for addiction is heroin. But if you go to Cincinnati, the #1 admittance in Cincinnati is actually addiction to marijuana. And so, you know, these drugs are not safe for kids to use, and they're not good for our workforce. I can tell you one of the problems that people, all the employers tell me in our community is that they'd like to hire 10 more people. And then they immediately, the next sentence out of their mouth is, and I can't find people that can pass the drug test to be able to hire. I'd like to hire 10 people, but I can't have people pass the drug test. So I think that this, you know, quite frankly, is only going to get worse as we go down this path, unless we're able to make sure that this drug is used for very specific medical purposes and it's tightly controlled. And I also want to say the other issue that I have with the medical marijuana bill is that they allow vaping. And I don't know about you, but I don't vape any of my medication currently. And that's another objection that I have to the way that this is working in Ohio.
All right. Well, let's move on to other issues. Of course, the House district that you're running for, not only Findlay and Hancock County, but also Hardin County and part of northern Logan County. What are issues that affect those areas, perhaps more than they affect us more in Findlay and Hancock County, and how are you best suited to represent them? And I believe, Mr. Sprague, you're first on this question.
Sure. You know, I think as you begin to travel the district, you realize that while it's not entirely homogeneous, we face a lot of the same issues. I mean, we're part of Northwest Ohio, and it's who we are, and it's who our area is. You know, I think that you know, Hardin County is so incredibly strong in terms of their agricultural industries, as is Hancock and Logan. But Hardin County in particular has just some wonderful farms, and I think a large Amish population, which we always try to account for as we're making laws and as we're thinking about public policy, because they're a key piece of our community in Hardin County. Certainly the heroin issue, I think, is something that affects people across the entire district. We do have some issues, I think, with regards to Hardin County, and particularly our infrastructure. Route 68 is obviously extremely important, that thoroughfare, whereas, you know, I-75 is perhaps more important for Hancock County to the north. But you know, keeping Route 68 open, and I think that workforce affects both Hancock County, Hardin County, and Logan County, and the shortage that we have in our workforce. We need more people that are in the skilled trades. As you go down into Hardin County, I can remember talking with the CEO of International Paper as they did their 100% expansion down in Hardin County. And I asked him, why did you come here to this area of the state? And he said, because we know that people work hard here. And we know the workforce that we have at our International Paper plant in Hardin County. And when we were making a decision, we knew that this was going to be a good investment for us. So I think that a lot of the public policy issues are the same, although there are nuances between the different communities.
Ms. Harshfield, the issues in other parts of the district and how you best represent them.
I'm afraid that I think that it's already been covered pretty well by Mr. Sprague. That I totally agree that I know that their drug problem is very great also. I think that it's a little more difficult for them in some respects because they are off of the major highways. I've driven down Route 68 many times now, and it's a wonderful view. They have beautiful farms that you get to see right from the road, and I have a few friends down in that area that I felt, you can tell that they have very prosperous farms, but they may have some limitations just by being in an area with just smaller towns, no bigger city close by. But outside of Findlay, I think we're the close city. But I think that Hardin County is an awful lot like Hancock County and would certainly benefit from many of the same kinds of things we want for the rest of the district.
I'm going to follow up on that because you guys both brought up US 68. And right now in Arlington, that's a big sticking point because that's their main street. And they get a lot of truck traffic through there. They don't have the funds as a small community to repair to the degree that it needs to be repaired for all the truck traffic that comes through. And there are certainly lots of villages like that throughout the state where they have a state route that comes through. That's their main drag. They get torn up. How can the state set up, or how can the state best handle these infrastructure issues for small communities like in Arlington where they have a state route that comes through and continually gets torn up? What's the state's responsibility in helping with that infrastructure? I believe since we're on a follow-up question, we'll just start the same way we did with Mr. Sprague.
Sure, I think it's really important, and it's important. We've tried without success, but we've tried to put some funds into the capital budget for Arlington and to help maintain Route 68 there. It is a problem because that's a thoroughfare. All those trucks are coming down, and not just going to International Paper with heavy loads of reams of paper, but they're also going down to Precision Strip there. And they've got huge steel coils on the back ends of those trucks, and they're maxing out their weight. And if it's not that, it's these enormous grain trucks for our agricultural community. So there's a lot of weight on Route 68. It gets a lot of use, and it's critical infrastructure for us. So we're going to continue to try to work on that in the next General Assembly. It's very important for Arlington, and it's important for our entire district to make sure that Route 68 is maintained.
All right, Ms. Harshfield.
I would say that the whole infrastructure problem kind of goes to the same thing. I think the state is doing far less support to local areas such as the cities and the infrastructure problems of the whole state. I favor increasing the taxation again, and I think that the state should be giving us more money to take care of these problems. One of the biggest things I think about is the bridge between Kentucky and Ohio on I-75. It is known to have structural problems, and we could solve things like that along with 68 going through Arlington. And I do think that the small cities need a lot more support from the state, and they've lost out so much as the taxation has gone down and funds have been cut to cities, and we have to pick it up locally, and it's not fair.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question here.
Okay. Let's switch to education a little bit. Most area school districts received a lower grade on the state report cards that were recently released. Do you believe this is a reflection on our schools, on the state's report card system, or the mandates that are required of
The
schools?
mandates, definitely. I have been, as a former teacher, very distressed to see this whole report card system, the whole new way of doing things for education. I feel the schools have gone downhill with all the efforts to supposedly improve them. And the idea that the Findlay schools are doing as poorly as what they said is just ridiculous. I know they're a very fine school system. I know they have wonderful teachers, and I think the students are learning a lot. They just don't reflect reality. The setup is very faulty, relying on all this testing. The testing is terrible. It's hard on the students. It does not allow teachers to really teach. They have to teach to the test all the time. It's a miserable situation, and it's very bad for our kids. I think that in order to restore things, we have to get rid of the testing. We may have to start from the ground up again, but to put things more where teachers actually have the input people who are educated for that. Stop trying to run it like a business. Education can never be like a business.
Well, you know, I think that if you ask parents, they want to see what their children are doing in the classroom. They want to see how they compare to other students across the state. And one of the things that we've done is we've required after third grade for kids to pass the third grade reading guarantee to make sure that when they go to fourth grade, they've got the reading skills necessary to be able to learn social studies and science and all those other subjects from fourth grade on up. Now, you look at before we implemented that test as a state, in some cases our graduation rates in terms of reading from third grade to fourth grade were in the 70 percentile range. After making that test mandatory and making it mandatory that students not advance unless they have those basic reading skills, all of a sudden our passage rates now are in the 90th percentile in our school district. So I think that shows that, you know, school districts can respond when asked to respond. And you're seeing, I think, a lot of kids that are now going to fourth grade that have the necessary skill set to perform not only in fourth grade but beyond into junior high school to learn those other subjects. With regards specifically to the question, I think that the low scores are obviously a result of where the state has put the bar. Obviously, nothing has changed in terms of the job that our school systems are doing. I agree that I think our school systems are doing an excellent job on average to help our students. And I think we probably need to go back and look at some adjustments to the grade card. But I think that over the long pull, as we set the bar higher, our educational system will continue to respond. And we want to run it not for the benefit of the teachers or the administrators, but really for the benefit of those kids and parents to make sure that they're getting the very best education that they can. And I think the parents deserve to know what's going on in the classroom, what the quality of the education is, and one of the only ways that you can get that on a standardized basis to compare with other districts is through the testing.
We've hit our time limit there. We've also run into our halftime break. We'll take 2 minutes. We'll be back. We'll probably talk a little bit more about education. And you're listening and watching the 83rd House District race on 1330 WFIN and UFTV.
Work, home, or out and about. I can check my balance from my smartphone, laptop, or tablet, and even deposit a check. I'll find convenient locations all across the region with a staff who cares from my community and a great network of ATMs. So there's always one close by. Visit theubank.com and see just how convenient your community bank is for you. Thank you, Omar. Member FDIC.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But you probably won't. You're busy. Kids, work, show coming back in 48 seconds. So let's do this now. Hold up one finger if you're a man, women, 0. 3 more fingers if you're over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40. If you're not sure, keep in mind you're sitting on a couch right now, so 1 more finger if you're not very active. 1 finger if yes, 0 if no. 1 yes, 0 no. Next, find the body type that looks most like you and hold up that many fingers while I look around awkwardly. And that's it. If you're holding up 5 fingers or more, you probably have prediabetes. Sorry to be so blunt, but hey, you're busy. Just go to the site.
Why do I choose Union Bank? Because they understand that I work hard for my money and deserve a reward, like Everyday Rewards Checking, a checking account that rewards you with a refund on your ATM charges. Plus, you can get paid, cash rewards, or great interest rate rewards just for using your debit card or paying a bill online, right from your phone or tablet. Stop by the Union Bank today and ask about Everyday Rewards Checking, or visit us online. Your community bank. Union Bank. Member FDIC.
And welcome back to our 83rd House District Forum featuring our candidates Mary Harshfield and Robert Sprague. I'm Doug Jenkins alongside Steve Dillon, serving as your co-moderators for tonight's event. So we were just talking about education, and we'll stay in that department. We heard a little bit about what our candidates believe, what they think about the current system of education in the state. But now The federal government has put the ball in the state's court to determine a little bit more about how the schools can govern and a little bit more about local control of education. We've heard a lot of area educators talk about this subject. In a perfect world, where you get to come up with some of the educational standards, what would you like to see for Ohio schools going forward with these new regulations in effect? And we'll start with you, Mr. Sprague.
Well, I think with regards to the federal government, we want to keep the federal government as far away from the educational system as possible. The closer, I think that Mary has expressed at least a little bit of frustration having, some standards up at the state level. And I think that the closer that we can, the better that we keep it away from the federal government and having them set standards for everybody, I think the better, because that means that we get to choose what we'd like to have here in Ohio, and we don't have to do the things that California is doing. So I think that in terms of additional things that I'd like to see, and I think we're headed down this path, but I'd like to see us do more of it. We send approximately 70% of our students in a lot of our districts over to college, but 30% of them come back after the first year. That's about 50% of our student population. They need to have some skill training to be able to enter the workforce right away. So I think that we need to do more at the high school level in terms of making sure that we have industry certified training. And what I mean by that is they've got a great facility called the Ramtech facility down in Marion, where those students actually go in and they work on Yamamoto robots. Well, Honda uses Yamamoto robots on their production line. So when you graduate high school with the Robotics 1 certification from Yamamoto, Honda looks at you when you walk in the door and they say, look, when would you like to start? Because they'd like to hire you right away because they know exactly, first of all, that you know how to work on their specific robots, and secondly, they know exactly what your capabilities are. This type of industry certification or best practice is available for Parker valves. It's available for Lincoln Electric welding equipment and many other skilled type trades. So I'd like to see us have more of a focus on that as we're going through the high school years and even in the junior high schools. The industrial arts, for a large part, are no longer part of the recognized curriculum.
All right, time limit on that. Ms. Hirschfield, same question.
I do agree that we greatly need to have many more people trained for the trades and for robotics and modern technology in general. Perhaps many of the students who are going off to college should have known earlier that they might actually be happier trying out one of these other things first. We do need to have good career counseling in the schools at an early age, perhaps. And coming back to the testing, I do think we do have to have standards, and I think that there is some testing that's necessary. I do believe that both the state and the federal level have places, they have some places where it's important to have some sorts of standards in order to assure equality across the country. We don't want to have some areas falling behind and damaging the students because they don't have the same high standards as, say, we do here in our district. We need to have certain standards without being overly controlling. I do think that local control and the state, they have their place, and it's all very important. We all need to work together on many levels. And we need to have also assured funding so that poorer cities don't have to have a lower educational standard in order just to survive.
Okay, changing gears a little bit here. We see a lot of construction on Interstate 75. Are there other areas in the state that need that same kind of attention?
Oh yes, I think that all the infrastructure, I think that all the state routes and everything, such as going through Arlington and virtually every place. I don't think we should have dirt roads any place or even gravel. We ought to be able to have, state-of-the-art roads all around the state. I think we used to have that at one time. I lived in Michigan for a long time. I was always happy to come back to Ohio because the roads were so much better at that point. Now it may be a little reversed. There are certainly many bridges also, not just the one that's on I-75 into Kentucky. There are many bridges that need attention, and other systems such as the water systems. I think that we need other kinds of infrastructure aside from the roads. We need to assure that everyone is getting clean water. There are more systems than just the pipes. Of course, we have to pay attention to the quality of the lake. That's all of these things are important to all of us and needs a lot more support.
Thank you. Robert, do you have concerns that you've heard of or seen in the state in terms of infrastructure?
Well, you know, we decided to privatize the turnpike and monetize the future turnpike collections, and that was almost a $3 billion investment that we made in our infrastructure, which has resulted in a lot of the orange barrels as you drive up and down I-75. You know, that investment in the turnpike and in the feeders to the turnpike is going to make a huge difference to help us maintain our infrastructure in the entire northern Ohio corridor, so that we remain one of the best places to house logistics in the world, not just in America, but in the world. You know, this allows us to take advantage of our land port with Canada through Detroit and Windsor. It allows us to take advantage of our water port through Toledo and the cargo that, and also in particular agricultural commodities that come through that port. It allows us to take advantage of our double stack container gateway through CSX, which is our double stack rail that comes all the way from the Atlantic Ocean, from Hampton Road, Virginia. And a lot of those containers come from overseas to Hampton Road, Virginia. We can double stack those literally to North Baltimore, which is just 5 miles north of our district. And that's a tremendous logistics advantage. That's why you see in our area places like Best Buy Distribution Center and Lowe's Distribution Center and Home Depot Distribution Center. And it's a tremendous natural logistics advantage for us, and we need to make sure that we maintain it. Probably the biggest complaint that I hear, to tell you the truth, is not that we're not maintaining roads, it's that there's too much construction on I-75. And man, I'm sure going to be glad when that's finally opened up to 3 lanes. I think that's going to be a big benefit for our community, and I'm going to be glad that when all that construction's done.
And just wait till they start through 75 through Findlay. Let's move on to law enforcement, and particularly the gun violence that we see in the state and across the nation. I was around last year this time when we were talking to city council candidates. We were talking about body cams for law enforcement officers, and a lot of the candidates for city council said there will likely be regulations that will come down from the state at some point on that. Well, you guys are running for state office, so what would be your opinion on state mandates, regulations when it comes to body cams for law enforcement? And I believe, Mr. Sprague, we begin with you.
Sure. I can just tell you, in my district, I've not heard a cry for body cams. Maybe it's because our police force is doing a great job here locally, our sheriff's offices, our troopers. You know, I think that they treat everybody very fairly, and I think that it should probably be a decision of the individual police departments. They're closest to the people. They know what their police forces are dealing with in their own communities, and I think that they need to make those decisions. I don't think it's necessary for the state to create a one-size-fits-all, because let me tell you, I mean, I've been to Cleveland, I've been to the east side of Cleveland. It's just a different circumstance. I can remember in Washington Elementary School on the east side of Cleveland, the teacher said, look, she said, we don't have these kids for an entire year. She said, she turned around to her class, and this was in November, and she said, kids, everybody who's here that is transferred into the school this year, into the class this year, I want you to stand up. A third of the class stands up. I mean, that would be uncommon here in, you know, our district in Hancock County. My kids will probably go to the same school their entire life. So, you know, different cities have different requirements. They have different needs, and I think that you know, our local city councils are best equipped to make those decisions.
Ms. Harsham?
I do think that it would be a mistake to just leave it up to the local departments, because the area that you just described would probably prefer not to have body cams because it would reveal maybe more bad things. I do think that here in Findlay we have an excellent department. People aren't mad, but in private conversations I've had, many people have expressed the idea that they think that it's a good idea for police in general to have body cams. I think that here we did have an incident last year where a young man was unfortunately killed, and it did seem that it would have been most likely very much a necessity. It was definitely in self-defense for the officer, and it was a terrible situation. It would have been backup for him. It wouldn't necessarily be 100% able. There wouldn't be an ability to totally be sure, but it would certainly have given him some backup that he was in the right. And this is one of the other sides of it that a lot of people don't think about. It's support where it's needed when officers need that. And I do think that a body cam is a good thing.
Okay. What role do you think the state legislature plays in job development? Is there anything more the state can be doing to drive economic growth?
Oh, I think so. Of course, the taxation issue comes up again, and I know they try to tax companies in a favorable way. I think that the whole country needs to work on this issue, but we are in an era of low taxations for big corporations, and they need to understand that they have obligations, and they could, on the state level, I believe that they could do things so that they're favorable, and perhaps the big companies get breaks in other ways, but they can see that their contributions to the state also help them. And aside from the education necessary and the infrastructure of the state that will help the companies come in, we have incentives of other kinds. So I do think that the jobs and the living conditions for people in our cities all over the state are important. They need to know that there will be good workers, and Ohio has good workers. They need to know that they have other kinds of comforts, good educational system that the companies will be able to take advantage of for their kids and themselves. There's much that we can do at the state level.
Yeah, I think we have, in terms of taxation, we have one of the most competitive tax systems for corporations in the United States. It's called the commercial activities tax. And the essence of it is it's a very low tax. In fact, it's less than, I mean, it's extremely low. And essentially, it's a sales tax on everything all the goods that company produces. And a lot of corporations, they don't necessarily like it, but they know that it's fair because there's not a lot of carve-outs and loopholes in it. It's a very fair tax. And we don't play this game of jacking up the tax rate and then favoring certain industries and corporations. It's a very flat, very fair tax, and that's why it's so low. So I think we do a good job with that. You've seen that, I mean, in terms of other things that our state can do to drive economic growth, to tell you the truth, I mean, we've accomplished it. We're here. I mean, we've got 3% unemployment here in Hancock County, 4.5% unemployment in Hardin County, a little bit higher than that, I think, in Logan County. But we've done great work. As a matter of fact, the one issue that our employers now are saying is that we've done such a good job of creating jobs in the state of Ohio. We have about 180,000 open jobs on Ohio Means Jobs website. And 20% of those are paid more than $80,000 a year. One of them is if you go to work for Ball Metal, they'll pay you $72,000 a year base salary just to come in if you're an electrician and you can maintain their equipment. That's just that's a phenomenal, that's just the base salary. So really the issue now, I mean, we've got our Bureau of Workers' Comp system under control. We've done a much better job with our regulatory environment. We've got our tax system competitive again, and we've balanced our budget and maintained our fiscal restraint. The real issue going forward now is this idea of workforce and being able to fill those jobs. And we need some solutions that we've already talked about with regards to that. So I think that I'm sure there's more that can be done, but we've done a lot.
All right, I think we have time for one more question for tonight's festivities. You mentioned in your opening statements getting rid of the death tax, or the so-called death tax. A lot of municipalities have said that has hurt them in terms of their local tax collection. Has the state done enough to recoup that, or to allow municipalities to recoup those lost dollars?
Well, I don't think that necessarily is the right question. I think the right question is, what do we need to do as a state to maintain our competitiveness, to keep people here in the state, to keep capital in the state, and how are our cities doing financially? And I think if you want to look, let's just say look at the city of Findlay. The city of Findlay, I think, has an unappropriated balance between $4 and $8 million, if I'm not mistaken now. They continue to invest in roads. They've got a full complement of police and firefighters, and so I think they're doing quite well fiscally, and that's without the estate tax. And one of the reasons, I'll tell you, this is interesting because I've actually had people come up to me and say, we decided to stay in Ohio because the estate tax is no longer here. It wasn't beneficial for us to go down to Florida, try to maintain a second residence there, play all these tax games. We just decided to pay more tax to the state of Ohio and stay here so that we can enjoy our grandkids. I can remember Speaker Batchelder at one point telling me that he had a conversation with then Governor Jeb Bush, and Jeb leaned over and said, "Hey, listen, the one thing you don't need to do is eliminate your estate tax because we have an awful lot of snowbirds that come down from Ohio and populate the state of Florida." And a lot of people were doing that for financial reasons as well as enjoying the warm weather. And I think we put a stop to that, and we're going to see more and more capital, more and more people stay in the state of Ohio, particularly in those higher income brackets, and they're going to keep their consumption here, and they're going to invest their capital here. And that capital is what starts small businesses. It's what allows our banking systems to make loans to other small businesses. So keeping all that development here, keeping that population here, and not having that brain drain go down to Florida and Texas, I think is critical.
All right, Ms. Harshfield.
Okay, I still see a lot of people moving to Florida. I disagree about the so-called death tax. I think it's a mistake to call it the death tax because that makes it sound like it's something that everybody has to pay because we all die. The truth is that only very rich people, you have to have a few $1 million before you're going to have to worry about this. It's not a burden for most people. It is a pain for people who have lots of money, but they can afford it, and it's part of their fair share. Everybody has gotten to think that all taxes are just terrible. I do think that the middle class, most of us, do not need to have more taxes. We definitely are overtaxed already because there have been so many cuts in the corporate taxes and big business in general, and it's been unfair on the middle class. It's part of what's contributed to a wide chasm between the middle class and or the upper and lower, I guess you'd have to say, for the high income and low income. When you have 20% of the new jobs coming in being wonderful high paying ones, don't forget that 80% of them are not high paying, and I think that's why we have to worry about having enough people being able to take jobs. They aren't being paid enough in them. We need a higher minimum wage. We need to have fair taxation so that we can take care of all of our problems. We have the water problems, we have educational problems, we have like understaffed social services and overworked people that I've known. There are many kinds of places where we need to invest more, and they just haven't had the money to be able to do enough of it.
All right, that will bring us to the end of our question and answer. And it's time now to go to our closing statements. Ms. Harshfield, you have the first closing statement.
Okay. I'm very much in favor of doing all that we can to improve our economy, and I do think that a big part of it is to solve the middle class problem. We need to raise standards on being able to bring in the employment. I think that was the wrong way to put that. We need to have enough to attract people to come to Findlay and to our district. We need to have enough high-paying jobs to support a family without having to go on various kinds of support, such as food stamps, many jobs, many people work full-time and they have to go on food stamps and have other support services. We need to improve and make it possible for education to go as far as it needs to be. We need to have quality, higher quality, and less testing in the K-12 level. We need to have affordable higher education, including we need to have more people educated for the trades. We also need to expand health care, and certainly takes in the drug problem in that area. We need to be able to have 100% of Ohioans cared for, and we would be able to solve many more problems because of just that, having health care for all.
Mr. Sprague?
Yes, I'd like to thank everybody for watching tonight, and I'd like to thank our moderators. You did a good job, and thank you for the tough questions, and also want to thank Mary for the answers that she gave and the excellent job that she's done tonight. Want to talk just directly to the voters for a minute and let you know that if you send me back down to Columbus, I'm going to continue to be focused on making sure that our budget is balanced, because all of the economic growth, all the success that we have as a state starts with one thing, and that is a balanced budget and fiscal conservatism. I'm going to continue to work on the drug problem at the state level. We're going to continue to fight the heroin epidemic, and I have real solutions that I'm going to offer. And one of the things that I'd like to do with regards to the heroin problem is finally attack it at the root. And this is, we need to make sure that the overprescribing is reduced in the state of Ohio. And the way that we do that is by implementing limits and a double check when you reach certain levels of prescribing for narcotics. If you're past the 3-month point and receiving a prescription for longer than 3 months, there needs to be a prior authorization there to make sure there's an underlying medical necessity for that prescription. The same for an 80 morphine equivalent dose level for a narcotic, or prescribing a benzo and a narcotic together, which is a recipe for death. So those type of things we know work. Well, the Bureau of Workers' Comp does them in the state of Ohio, and I'd like to extend that to all of our narcotics prescriptions in the state of Ohio so that we can finally tackle this problem at its root, which is the overprescribing that's going on in the state. I'm also going to go down to the state and fight for not just our district, but people across the state that want to have skilled trades jobs. So that we can begin to fill this employment gap that's come across our state as a result of all the economic activity that we now have going on in the state of Ohio.
All right, that will bring us to the end of our forum tonight. Our thanks to the candidates, Steve for co-moderating, and of course to UFTV Channel 20, WFIN, WLFC for live coverage on the radio. And of course you can read all about this tomorrow in the Courier in print. Most of all, I want to thank you for those of you who watched and listened to tonight's forum. We hope that you've heard something that maybe solidified your sense of the candidates. Now, if you heard something that perhaps clinched your vote, remember early voting is now underway in Ohio, and Election Day coming up November 8th. I'm Doug Jenkins, wishing you a good night from the University of Findlay.